When this delivery man's surprising secret was exposed, everyone was left shocked and inspired. Charlie had always been the invisible man in Maplewood, a small-town delivery guy flashing a warm smile that masked the weight of his responsibilities. Every day after his morning route, he returned to the cramped little apartment he shared with his mother and younger sister, the echoes of laughter haunting him, the joy he wished he could provide. Here he was, pouring his energy into a thankless job while carrying the aftershocks of a tragedy that turned their world upside down. His father's sudden passing hadn't just left a void, it had thrown Charlie into the dual roles of caretaker and breadwinner. Each package he delivered came with the dismissive glances from customers who saw him as just a delivery man. Those stares felt like daggers, sharp and unyielding, pricking through his confidence. Was he enough? Was hard work and integrity truly sufficient in a world obsessed with prestige and recognition? Beneath that smile, doubt loomed large, echoing in the corners of his mind like a relentless drumbeat. As he wrestled with his thoughts one fateful afternoon, Charlie made a detour while on his route. A dilapidated house caught his eye, abandoned, forgotten like him. Curiosity dragged him inside. He stumbled upon a dusty box hidden under the floorboards. Inside were letters written by his father, passionate declarations of discovery, dreams of scientific innovation stifled by life as precious. The man he knew as a dad had a vibrant legacy as an unrecognized scientist that had slipped through the cracks. Flames of ambition ignited in Charlie's heart. He could bring his father's work to life, honor his memory beyond grieving. But the pathway to that honor twisted and turned in his mind. Could a delivery man like him, drenched in responsibilities and doubts, actually tread the waters of academia? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Classes began, with Charlie balancing books in one hand and the cacophony of family responsibilities in the other. Every debate in the classroom felt like a judgment, his classmates' skeptical glances piercing through his resolve. He felt trapped between discovering his dreams and the judgment of a world that viewed him as lesser. Each sleepless night spent poring over textbooks, fueled by cheap coffee, clawed at his spirit. Could he actually succeed in academia? Or was he merely deluding himself? When he stumbled upon his father's neglected theories in the dim light of his study, a sense of urgency washed over him. Would his father's brilliance finally see the light, or would he be another name on a forgotten list? The clock ticked louder in his mind, echoing his racing thoughts. As he pieced together his research, anxiety swelled like a storm entity, threatening to consume him. More than his studies, it was the fear of failure that seeped into his bones. If he faltered, his family's hopes would crumble alongside him. This journey was supposed to revive his father's legacy but ended up feeling like a crossfire, battlefield waged inside him, where guilt, ambition, and echoes of a lost potential clashed. Sitting at the intersection of despair and determination, he faced a brutal truth: would he allow the doubts of others to drown him? The answer whispered through his racing mind as the tension soared. Charlie's next steps felt monumental, not just for him, but for the memory of a father whose dreams echoed through the pages of his letters. The weight of the possibility hung thick in the air. Would his revelation prove he was more than a delivery man? Would it be enough to carve a place for both him and his father's dreams in a world quick to judge? The following weeks felt like a relentless tide, with Charlie thrashing against the pull of expectation and responsibility. Each day after his deliveries, he found himself entrenched in classrooms that buzzed with youthful optimism, starkly contrasting his own trepidation. The letters from his father lay scattered on his desk, ink smudged by tears and determination, and every time he glanced at them, a new wave of resolve surged within him. But just as quickly, doubts flickered in, unwanted, familiar. During one of his late-night study sessions, focusing on a particularly challenging problem in quantum physics, the hostility of self-criticism clawed at him. "Who do you think you are?" it echoed. "You don't belong here." The voices of ridicule from customers who saw him as just a delivery man taunted him in the shadows. This was no mere classroom, it felt like a stage, and Charlie was all but a forgotten extra in a story meant for others. Determined to shift this narrative, he turned to the notes left behind by his father. Each document revealed stories not just of hope, but also of tenacity. His father had faced adversities far worse and yet held steadfast to his dream even if it never manifested fully. With each read, Charlie felt the gravity of legacy knitting together his own aspirations and the lost dreams that he inherited. His resolve solidified. He couldn't just live in the shadows of his father's failures. Instead, he had to breathe life into them, showcasing the brilliance that had been overlooked for far too long. Fueled by purpose, he took on extra shifts at the delivery company, ready to build a safety net for his family while still pursuing his academic ambitions. As the days morphed into sleepless nights, he began crafting a project that intertwined his father's theories with his own understanding of modern-day science. This would not merely be a tribute, it would be a manifestation of the intertwined journeys, a step toward reclamation of lost dreams. But the pressure wasn't just external, it burrowed deep within, threatening to fracture him. The challenge of balancing work, family, and study intensified, often leaving him gasping for breath. During a particularly grueling week, Charlie faced a moment of truth. The academic midterms loomed, and he was teetering on the brink of collapse. In one pivotal moment, after receiving a disheartening grade on a paper, he sat alone in his gloomy apartment, tears mingling with frustration. The thought of giving up flared like a spark, temporary, yet alluring. But then, he glanced at his father's letters, words coloring his vision and igniting something deep within him. Struggle is not a failure, one letter proclaimed. It is the birthplace of innovation. That night, rather than burying himself in despair, Charlie composed an email to his professor, revealing his struggle and inviting him to discuss his project, a risk, yet one that could reshape his path. Would this act of vulnerability signal weakness or strength? The next day, he hit send and felt a weight lift. He had staked a claim on his narrative, daring to reshape his identity beyond what anyone expected. Charlie knew he was at a turning point, one filled with possibilities that stung with fear yet sparked excitement. In facing the stakes of vulnerability, he opened a door to transformation, one that would either break him or mold him. And as the response to his email arrived, the clock ticked toward another pivotal moment. Would he find a mentor in his professor, or would his plea only confirm his fears of inadequacy? The answer lay just beyond his next step. The next morning dawned grey and heavy, mirroring Charlie's mood as he sat at his desk, fingering the mouse with jittery anticipation. He had already checked his inbox multiple times, but nothing had changed. Each moment spent waiting felt like an eternity, amplifying his anxiety. The room felt stifling, shaking the foundations of the resolve he had built over the past weeks. Suddenly, a ping sliced through the silence. Charlie's heart raced as he opened the email. His professor's response was succinct but filled with promise. Let us meet to discuss your ideas further. I am intrigued to learn about your project. When are you available? Relief washed over him. This wasn't just a chance to explain his work, it could be the catalyst for his journey into legitimacy and confidence in his studies. Yet even in triumph, he felt the tug of self-doubt lurking nearby. Charlie settled on an afternoon meeting, leaving him with hours to contemplate. As he paced his apartment, thoughts spiraled. What if the professor laughed? What if he thought Charlie's idea was foolish? He recalled the remarks of scornful customers, how their dismissive words echoed in the corners of his mind. Just a delivery man. He had exhausted himself trying to drown those voices out, only for them to resurface at a pivotal time. In that moment, he realized that confronting these thoughts was more than just about one meeting, it was about embracing who he was and the journey that had shaped him. The day unfolded as he prepared. He styled his hair, donning his best button-up shirt, wanting to appear both professional and authentic. Standing in front of the mirror, he whispered affirmations he had learned to use during moments of discouragement. You belong here. You have something to offer. With each word, doubt was slowly challenged, and when he finally stepped out of his apartment, it was with purpose. The university's bustling corridors were a stark contrast to his quiet home. Students buzzed with laughter and chatter, and Charlie felt like an imposter among the animated discussions. Yet, he had come too far to let intimidation grip him. He approached the designated meeting room, his heart racing and mind swirling, but with each step, he reminded himself that he was carving his path, step by step. When he entered the room, his professor was waiting, a friendly smile spreading across his face. Charlie. I'm glad to see you. The professor's warmth momentarily eased his nerves. As they exchanged pleasantries, Charlie could feel the walls of anxiety slowly beginning to crumble. As they dived into his project, he found himself explaining the amalgamation of his father's theories with modern quantum ideals. He spoke passionately, words flowing more easily than he'd anticipated. The professor listened intently, nodding, and occasionally interjecting with insightful questions that further pushed Charlie to articulate his vision. Each response validated his ideas, and for the first time, Charlie felt the weight of expectation shift into a conversation fueled by curiosity. But then, as they explored the implications of his work, the conversation turned somber. "You're very close to something profound here, Charlie. But understand, if you put your name on this, you're stepping into a world that can be brutal. Are you prepared for that?" He pondered for a moment. Was he? With his father's dream still echoing in his heart, Charlie realized that this was not merely about academic success, it was a matter of identity. To allow himself to be recognized in this new light would mean reconciliation with the past, the world to remember and elevate his father's untold story. As the meeting concluded, and they agreed to further sessions, Charlie realized the journey had only just begun. He might have momentarily silenced the inner critic, but as he walked away, he questioned, was he ready to take the next step, to be vulnerable in a world where exposure could lead to ridicule or validation? The answer lay not in his thoughts but in how he would choose to act moving forward. In that moment, he felt both empowered and terrified. The stakes were rising, not just academic recognition, but something deeper and far more personal. What would he risk to reveal his true self and champion the legacy of lost dreams? Charlie spent the following weekend in a state of restless anticipation and deep reflection. The professor's comments echoed in his mind, particularly the part about stepping into a brutal world. He had always known academia could be unforgiving, but now it felt personal. What did it mean to stake his identity on an untested theory? In the depths of his thoughts, he sensed a growing urgency to confront his doubts head-on. He slid his laptop open under the dim light of his small kitchen, surrounded by stacks of old journal articles and pages of scrawled notes. His father's handwritten theories flickered through his imagination, their untapped brilliance simmering beneath years of neglect. As he combed through old papers, he sought clarity in the convoluted pathways of thought his father had mapped out. There were ideas waiting for revival, and with each revelation, Charlie felt a spark of purpose igniting in his chest. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, the act of rediscovery became a source of strength. The chaotic swirl of uncertainty narrowed into focus as he began to outline his arguments and prepare a new presentation for the professor. The words poured out, reflecting the hidden pride in reclaiming his father's work while blending his own insights. Charlie began to see a tangible link between his past and future, and for the first time, he envisioned a place where they could coexist. Yet, with this momentum came the specter of fear. What if he failed? The haunting echoes of past derision resurfaced. Just a delivery man. Those words could easily resurface, crushing his newfound confidence. He interrogated himself, demanding to know if he had the resilience to withstand criticism, to be vulnerable. On Monday, he decided to approach his professor again, eager to share the polished ideas. He felt a torrent of apprehension churn inside him but chose to channel that energy as he walked the familiar corridors once more. Each step toward the professor's office was filled with an internal dialogue, "You're not a delivery man. You're more." The meeting room was lined with books that smelled of old leather, and the atmosphere held an electric tension as he entered. His professor greeted him cheerfully and gestured for him to take a seat. Charlie's palms were clammy, and his stomach twisted as he unfurled his notes, glancing up to gauge the professor's mood. "I've been refining the ideas we discussed," Charlie began, his voice steadier than he felt. He presented the evolution of his theory, weaving in personal anecdotes about his father. The professor sat forward, his brow furrowing with interest as Charlie explicated complex concepts with clarity. As the discussion progressed, Charlie realized he was not merely defending his ideas but advocating for his father's narrative. He was passionate, articulating the beauty he saw in bridging past and present. He could see the professor absorbing the essence of Charlie's conviction, and it lit a fire within him, a flicker of hope igniting into a flame. Towards the end, the professor leaned back and pondered, "You know, there is something uniquely profound in what you're creating. Have you considered presenting this at the academic conference next month?" The question hit him like a bolt of lightning. A conference. It was much more than he had ever anticipated. It would mean placing himself under scrutiny, sharing both triumph and vulnerability in a public space. Charlie wrestled with the idea, envisioning the audience seated before him, dissecting each word he spoke. A part of him wanted to retreat, however, a more significant part felt bolstered by the professor's faith in him. "I need time to prepare," Charlie replied, the weight of the opportunity heavy yet tantalizing. The professor nodded in understanding, a satisfied expression on his face. As he left the meeting, adrenaline surged through his veins. This was no longer just about academic validation, it was about reclaiming his family's legacy and presenting it with the courage he had long thought he lacked. He felt the urge to confront not just his doubts but also his identities interlaced with his past and present. Little did he realize, his journey was drawing closer to an inevitable confrontation, one that would challenge him to test his foundational values head-on. Would he truly embrace his potential, or would the ghosts of his past prove insurmountable? The question loomed, what sacrifices would he make to break free from the shadows of doubt and claim his newfound identity? The days leading up to the conference were a blur of activity and anticipation. Each morning began with a feverish urgency that sent Charlie into a whirlwind of research, writing, and rewriting. As he pored over his notes, there was no longer just trepidation, but a fierce desire to connect his father's legacy with his own burgeoning identity as an academic. Sitting at his cluttered desk, he meticulously refined his presentation. Slides filled with bullet points became a mosaic of his thoughts, rich with concepts that wove together history, theory, and personal anecdotes. Charlie was transforming from a passive recipient of knowledge to an active creator. Each time he rehearsed a presentation, he found himself more at ease with his narrative. Yet with each rehearsal came an unsettling realization, the closer he got to sharing his ideas publicly, the more vulnerable he felt. He questioned if he was prepared for the audience to dissect not only his theories but also the deeply personal stories intertwined with them. Would they reject his father's legacy as just another relic of the past? The fear gnawed at him, whispering that no matter how much he had prepared, he could still fall flat amidst the charges of his intellect. Charlie's internal landscape shifted drastically one evening while he was pacing the tiny confines of his apartment. He stopped abruptly, staring at the reflection in the mirror, aware of the persistent doubt that lurked beneath the surface. "This is bigger than you," he whispered, grasping onto the realization that his journey was not just academic, it was personal. It was a quest for belonging, for significance beyond the labels others had imposed. He decided to use the looming conference as a catalyst for change rather than an object of dread. Instead of viewing the audience as critics poised to tear him apart, he reframed them as co-investigators along on a journey through the complex depths of knowledge. Could they not just as easily inspire him, prompting deeper interactions and exchanges? This mental paradigm shift reinforced a sense of responsibility. He needed to honor his father's work, and for that, he had to embrace the vulnerability of sharing. As the event approached, Charlie sought feedback. He invited peers to his apartment for mock presentations, gathering thoughts, encouragement, and constructive critiques. Each time someone reacted positively to his insights, a wave of warmth washed over him, stoking a fire of resilience. Yet, with every bit of praise came an unavoidable realization: the higher the expectations, the greater the potential for failure. On the day of the conference, he stared into the mirror once more, adjusting his tie. Tremors of nervous energy coursed through him, but they were different now. They were laced with excitement, intertwining with the resolve he had cultivated over weeks. He couldn't just be a vessel for his father's ideas, he was ready to stand before the world and claim them as his own, presenting them with conviction. As Charlie entered the auditorium, a soft buzz of chatter filled the air. The bright lights illuminated faces in the crowd: students, educators, and scholars, but to him, they were also as uncertain as he felt. Each pair of eyes seemed to hold a story, a multitude of experiences. Gripping the podium, he began to speak, stepping into that world the professor had warned him about, but now it felt less brutal and more alive. His heart raced as he transitioned from theory to personal narrative, weaving in the essence of his father's thoughts with explicit passion. The room fell silent. As he spoke, he became attuned not just to his anxieties but to an ever-evolving dialogue that included everyone present. With every slide unveiled, a deeper conviction enveloped him. This was the synthesis of years of struggle, redemption, and legacy. As he navigated the complexities of the topic, Charlie felt his fears melting away, surrendering to a higher purpose. Yet, as he reached the concluding remarks, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his mind. How would they react? Would they understand the weight of what he was presenting? He took a moment, catching a breath, and faced the audience with resolve. "In reclaiming my father's work, I invite you to rediscover your own connections to the past. Let us traverse the realms of knowledge together." But just as he completed his closing statement and a brief silence filled the room, a hand shot up from the back, a familiar face, one he hadn't wanted to see. A voice cut through the tension, dripping with skepticism: "But what if it isn't enough?" Charlie felt a rush of adrenaline surge through him, not of fear but of determination. The time had come to confront the doubters and fully embrace the purpose he had created. How would he respond, and could he truly defend the legacy of his father in those uncertain moments ahead? The stakes had risen, and the true test awaited. The question echoed in the silence, reverberating against the walls of the auditorium. Charlie's heart raced as he locked eyes with the hand that had risen, the familiar haunting presence among the audience. It was a feeling as though the very ground beneath him shifted, thrusting him into an unexpected duel on a stage that had momentarily felt like a sanctuary. Is it not enough? He repeated internally, clinging to the words while drawing strength from the weight they carried. This was his moment, a moment that could define not just his presentation, but also the legacy of his father, whose ideas had been marginalized and vilified in places far beyond this room. Charlie straightened his shoulders, eyes narrowing slightly, feeling the energy of newfound resolve wash over him. I believe that it is more than enough, he declared, his voice steady and robust, testing the waters of resistance. It's a starting point, a conversation we need to have. Not just about what my father built, but about how each of us constructs our realities with those foundations. Charlie's words flowed, fueled by urgency and a palpable desire for authenticity. He saw faces in the audience shifting from skepticism to contemplation. Their collective curiosity ignited something within him. He began to dissect his father's work, bringing it to life by revealing its intricacies, historical contexts overlooked, theories misinterpreted, and the emotional weights that draped themselves over the research. I understand why some might question its relevance, he continued, leaning into both vulnerability and strength. However, it's not merely about bridging past and present, it's about the values determined by those who have engaged with this knowledge. It prompts us to ask big questions: what does it mean to learn? And who gets to decide which learning is valuable? Time felt distorted as he battled against the lingering voices of doubt. In that moment, the room transformed into a crucible, where his perception of knowledge collided with the universe of ideas around him. Charlie sensed the audience becoming contributors rather than critics. He could feel their energy shift, perceiving glimpses of acceptance sparking within their eyes. He pressed forward, utilizing his own vulnerabilities as proof of lived experience, illustrating how the lessons he'd drawn from his father's work had shaped who he was today. He spoke not only with intellect but with the fervor of someone uncovering truth for the first time, sharing insights that seemed to bridge the divide between theory and practice. Much like the exploration of knowledge, personal growth finds its way through discomfort, he said, noticing the palpable tension transforming into engagement. We are meant to push against these boundaries. That is where the richness lies. And there it was, the connection, the vulnerability of shared human experience, an intangible thread linking him to the audience. As he wrapped up, a quick glance toward the critic at the back revealed a softened expression, questions replaced by contemplation. A part of Charlie longed for affirmation, a nod of recognition that he had navigated this personal storm successfully. But then, even before the applause could thunder through the room, a different voice arose, another skeptic from the side. But how can we trust the past to inform our future when what is enough remains so subjective? Charlie's pulse quickened again. A sudden rush of uncertainty gripped him, and he had to rally. Drawing breath, he repeated his father's mantra that knowledge isn't the sole measure of worth, context and perspective complete the picture. Trust builds over time, just as knowledge does, he replied, this time with a steadier heart. It's not one inquiry but an evolution, a dance between the past and future that invites us to adapt and innovate. Understanding is never static. As he faced this unexpected challenge, Charlie realized the true depth of his personal development. This wasn't only about reclaiming his father's legacy, it was a ritual of birth his own ideas. Taking flight, engaging with doubt while refusing to bow to it. He left the podium, thunderous applause ringing in his ears, yet the journey felt incomplete. Questions lingered, and Charlie sensed a deeper calling within him. He recognized the need not just to rise to this occasion, but to immerse himself further into this dance of learning, a dance that could unearth possibilities far beyond his previous understanding. As the chatter in the auditorium faded, an uneasy anticipation shadowed his thoughts. What would the next conversation reveal? He couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The true challenge loomed on the horizon, and Charlie's heart raced for another reason. It wasn't just about knowledge anymore, it was about who he would become next. Charlie stepped off the stage, buoyed by the applause yet weighed down by the unanswered questions still swirling in his mind. The air felt thicker now, charged with possibilities. He scanned the audience, his gaze resting for a moment on the skeptic who had posed the challenging query. There was no conclusive triumph in winning a debate, instead, an ember of curiosity sparked within him, one that suggested his journey was far from complete. In the corridor behind the auditorium, he paused to gather his thoughts. Each reflection, every gaze from the audience played like a reel in his mind, some faces lit with enlightenment, others shadowed by doubt. This dichotomy mirrored his own internal struggle, a dance between confidence and vulnerability that demanded evolution. How was he to channel his father's legacy into something that made sense not just academically but emotionally, personally? Finding a quiet nook, Charlie leaned against the cool wall, absorbing the whirlwind of emotions. He replayed moments from his presentation, exploiting every throbbing uncertainty that wanted to tether him back to his insecurities. Those moments fostered a sense of urgency, a need to redefine what knowledge meant not just for him, but for others who might share his struggle. "You need to dig deeper," he whispered to himself, a mantra of sorts. With a growing sense of anticipation, he took out his phone and began typing. The words flowed like a cathartic stream, revealing thoughts tangled within, the importance of context, the weight of emotional intelligence, and the nuanced nature of trust. He realized he was no longer merely an echo of his father's ideas, he was an evolving thinker forging his path. Rising from the wall, he felt lighter yet emboldened by a newfound determination. He sought not just to answer difficult questions but to engage in the raw essence of inquiry, the personal, subjective dialogue that transcended theory. Sitting at the cafe just outside the auditorium, he began to map out ideas for a workshop that could facilitate meaningful conversations around his father's work, inviting participants to share their narratives alongside theoretical frameworks. Yet for all this clarity, internal conflict brewed. Would he risk exposing himself further? What if sharing his journey alongside his father's work revealed vulnerabilities he wasn't prepared to confront? To lead this workshop meant opening the door to collective healing, a journey taken with others as they navigated their relationships with knowledge and trust. He paused, contemplating the weight of his fears. The gnawing insecurity told him to retreat, to cocoon himself in the safety of solitude. But an even louder voice urged him to step forward, to take that risk. Wouldn't it be infinitely more powerful to create a resonance with others, to allow his vulnerability to be the bridge towards shared growth? With each passing moment, that initial spark of excitement ignited into a profound desire to transform his fears into a rallying point for connection. He mapped out the structure. Sessions would focus on shared experiences, the dynamic of personal versus collective knowledge, and confronting deeply embedded biases. As he leaned back in his chair, a calm resolve enveloped him. The workshop was not just to share his perspective, it was a call to action, a shared exploration of uncertainties that dared to challenge the status quo of knowledge and validation. There was a delicate interplay of courage and vulnerability, one that could forge a deeper understanding. With a final sip of coffee, Charlie felt the chains of doubt unshackling, each decision crystallizing into a resolution. But as he prepared to finalize his plans, a sudden text from his closest mentor flashed on the screen, a cautious message hinting at opposition in the academic community regarding his father's work. Charlie's heart raced anew. It was an invitation to confront not only the external skeptics but also his internal biases. An unforeseen battle lay ahead, one that would require him to not just defend a legacy but also reinvent it within a realm that had yet to embrace its potential. What lay ahead promised to be a tumultuous journey of self-discovery, pushing back against the shadows that sought to undermine not just his father's legacy but his own emerging voice. Would he emerge victorious, or would this challenge unravel everything he had worked for? The fight was only just beginning. Charlie's resolve solidified into determination, and as he stepped out of the cafe, the sunlight filtered through the trees, casting shadows that danced around him. He felt the weight of his decision pressing against his chest, a reminder of the personal stakes involved. This was more than just a workshop, it was a chance to reframe the narrative of his father's legacy. Yet the thought of confronting the academic community filled him with trepidation, a storm brewing just beneath the surface of his newfound confidence. With each stride across the campus, he turned inward, grappling with the fear of inadequacy that again crept back into his thoughts. What if his workshop failed? What if participants didn't connect with his vision? Shaking off the spiraling doubts, Charlie resolved to lean into his discomfort, believing that vulnerability could catalyze growth not just for him, but for his audience. The mentor's message haunted him, each word a subtle challenge. It didn't take long before Charlie found himself in the library, enveloped by the scent of old books and polished wood. This was his fortress, a place where he could dissect his father's work and the prevailing skepticism head-on. Unrolling pages of research papers and notes, he examined each argument against his father's theories. The titles had often been dismissive, framing legacy as something rigid, rather than dynamic and evolving. Could he transform this unyielding stance into a conversation that invited dissent? As he read, he discovered a thread of dissatisfaction running parallel to his father's work, a disconnect between theory and application. Charlie's pen glided over his notepad, making connections that he hadn't seen before. There was a gravity to the feedback that had felt like an anchor. He now viewed it as an opportunity to address misunderstandings, to act as a bridge between the protective walls of academia and the fluidity of personal experience. Yet, with each discovery, a deeper truth emerged: his father's work was never meant to exist in isolation. It was meant to evolve through dialogue, echoing the very essence of inquiry. He scribbled ideas for incorporating lived experiences into theoretical discussions, imagining real testimonies that juxtaposed academic rigors with poignant, personal narratives. When he finally stepped out of the library, a plan was taking shape. His proposed workshop would not merely be theoretical discussions, it would center around exercises that invited individuals to share their vulnerabilities. He envisioned interactive segments where participants could dismantle biases within themselves, thus confronting the internalized skepticism that often stifled open discourse. Determination surged through him. Charlie was no longer just concerned with defending a legacy. He was building a movement within himself according to provoke transformation and challenge comfort zones. Yet shadows loomed. A part of him still questioned whether he had the capacity to lead this endeavor successfully. Each step towards the front of the workshop room felt heavier as doubts accumulated. Spaces for dissent resonate deeply, and Charlie understood this could embolden voices that others silenced. Once again, he felt that spark of hope, and ember flickering in the cold wind of uncertainty. What if this workshop could be more than just a space for dialogue? He envisioned it as a crucible for change, forging pathways for understanding where there once existed hostility. With energy coursing through him, Charlie reached out to his mentor, admitting the conflicting sensations swirling within him. The conversation was candid. His mentor shared insights of facilitation, reminding him that strength often manifested through clear communication and awareness of one's own narrative. Prepare yourself for the skeptics, Charlie, his mentor cautioned. Handling disagreement is part of the process, and it can be an excellent tool for growth. Embrace it. Charlie hung up, and a disposition of anxiety shifted into a robust foundation of resolve. He now looked forward to the impending conflicts, understanding that each moment of contention was an opportunity not just for growth but for furthering his father's ideals of dialogue and connection. As he walked home, new details unfurled in his mind, interventions he could update to make his points cogent against the skepticism. He realized that complexity stirred growth, it challenged simple narratives. And with excitement simmering beneath his skin, he pondered how best to present these ideas. But just as he turned onto his street, a new text flashed on his phone, a message from the skeptic who had questioned him in the audience. The tone hinted at a willingness to engage further, perhaps even exchanging the harsh critique for a conversation. Intrigued, Charlie hesitated, caught in the complexity of what this could mean. Would this be the breakthrough he needed, or a trap set to expose his vulnerabilities? The tension pressed around him, thick and undeniable, as the questions began piling up in his mind. What lay ahead could redefine everything he had begun to build, but would he have the foresight and tenacity to steer it in the right direction? A chill coursed through Charlie as he stared at the text, his mind racing. It was easy to imagine the worst-case scenario, a calculated response designed to undermine him further, to drain the confidence he had just begun to muster. Yet, another, more hopeful thought echoed in his head. This skeptic's outreach could be the catalyst for deeper understanding, a chance to transform conflict into collaboration. He hesitated for a moment longer before tapping the screen to reply. I appreciate your message. I would like to discuss your concerns in more depth if you're open to it. Anxiously, he pressed send. The knot in his stomach churned, but beneath it lay a current of energy, anticipation, perhaps even excitement, coursed through him. The following day unfolded like a tightrope walk. With each hour leading up to the meeting looming before him, a conversation that felt both dread-laden and promising, he busied himself with his presentation. The blend of personal stories with theoretical frameworks filled his mind, spiraling and reformulating as he searched for the perfect narrative to convey both his father's vision and his own experiences. In the quiet of his room, he crafted scenarios where participants could explore their biases, forging pathways into deeper awareness. He envisioned an exercise that invited peers to share their stories, one side recounting an experience that shaped their beliefs while the other listened, bearing witness. Would they emerge more compassionate? More understanding? His thoughts spiraled into questioning once again as he prepared. What did he hope to achieve in this meeting? Did he want to prove his point, or could he step back and allow for a genuine exchange? The latter felt daunting, but he reminded himself that growth hinged on vulnerability. He inhaled, grounding himself in that truth. The cafe where they agreed to meet had an ambience that instigated reflection, comforting yet filled with white noise of benign conversation. Charlie arrived early, fidgeting with the edge of his notebook. In that moment, he could feel the weight of the expectations, his own as well as those of the skeptic who had the power to validate or tear apart his efforts. When his counterpart arrived, Charlie maintained eye contact, suppressing the urge to look away as they exchanged shallow pleasantries. The skeptic, whom he learned was named Jessica, had an air of confidence that both intimidated and intrigued him. As they settled into their seats, Charlie steeled himself for what lay ahead. "Thank you for being willing to talk," he started, summoning a steadiness in his voice. "I know our last encounter had its tensions." Jessica nodded, an enigmatic smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I'm interested in your upcoming workshop. I've had my reservations about your father's work, but I see the potential for growth in this format you're proposing." Desire flooded him to defend his father, to convince her of the merit in his legacy. But as Jessica began to outline her criticisms, Charlie felt that same tension from their previous encounter, not as a threat now, but a tool, a means to navigate this discourse. He listened intently, suppressing his own preconceptions and allowing her views to pierce through his defenses. What became evident was that skepticism could serve a purpose, that it didn't have to be met with resistance. As they discussed his father's theories and their implications, Charlie felt his own conviction strengthen. The dialogue flowed. Jessica pushed him on definitions, challenged him to clarify his positions, and through the exchange, Charlie discerned an important truth: facilitating a conversation required not just sharing one's truth but also inviting others to stake their claims. The meeting stretched longer than he anticipated, giving way to revelations about his own biases, hidden within layers of his father's work he had previously overlooked. Together, they uncovered commonalities: the desire for understanding, for dialogue, for connection that propelled well beyond individual legacies. Finally, as they exchanged contact details and made tentative plans to further discuss the workshop, Charlie felt lighter, untethered from the anxiety that had once gripped him in that cafe. This was not an endorsement of his father's ideals but an extension of them into a real-world application that included voices previously silenced. As he walked away, new concepts raced through his mind. How could he incorporate this newfound approach into the workshop? The answers started to align, spinning a greater tapestry. But as he rounded the corner, another notification pinged on his phone, an email from the academic committee that would approve his workshop. The subject line sent a thrill through him: "Important information regarding your proposal." Heart pounding, Charlie slowed his steps. Was this the validation he needed, or would it cast shadows over everything he had built? The uncertainty loomed, a disquieting reminder that no matter how much progress he made, new challenges awaited. With a deep breath, Charlie opened the email, adrenaline surging through him. The committee's response was thorough, yet encouraging. They acknowledged his innovative approach, praising his blend of personal narrative with academic rigor. However, the last lines jolted him: a request for further elaboration on how he planned to tackle potential criticism surrounding his father's theories. Charlie felt the familiar ebb and flow of anxiety wash over him. While the committee's encouragement was a significant validation, the request for further analysis reignited doubts about whether he could effectively navigate the intricacies of defending his father's work in an academic environment that had often been dismissive of it. This was the moment, a defining stage where he could either succumb to fear or embrace the challenge presented before him. As he strung words together in his mind, he realized this was an opportunity to refine not only his argument but also his understanding of the nuances that accompanied academic discourse. He had faced skepticism and emerged with his confidence bolder. He had transformed doubt into dialogue. Now, with renewed focus, he could deepen his analysis. Yes, he could harness the power of vulnerability to engage others, but he also needed to back his concepts with lucid, well-researched justifications. Days blurred into one another as Charlie entered a fervor of writing and revision. He delved deep into academic literature, scrutinizing not just the criticism aimed at his father's work, but the interstitial spaces of interpretation and understanding that could be bridged with courage. He depended heavily on both Jessica's insights and his father's letters, drawing lines between theoretical foundations and personal stories that made those theories resonate. He crafted meticulous responses to the committee's queries, articulating how personal experience could serve as a powerful lens for understanding scientific concepts. With each passing moment, he felt lighter, a sense of duty to not only present his father's theory but also invigorate it with contemporary relevance by showcasing how narratives could ignite engagement and understanding. Finally, the moment arrived when he clicked send on the email, committing his proposal to the academic ether. He found himself in a whirlwind of thoughts. He had meticulously woven strands through the expected critiques while reinforcing his own narrative. In all his uncertainty, he had transformed into an advocate, ready to elevate the discourse beyond statistical indifference. But even in triumph, Charlie felt unsettled. Would the committee embrace his evolution, or would they dismiss it as mere sentimentalism? He couldn't predict their response. Yet, he recognized that the journey mattered more than the validation. It had molded him into someone capable of holding space for both vulnerability and intellectual rigor. As days turned into a week, he rode a wave of restlessness, his mind racing with anticipation. Each small disruption of routine became a backdrop for uncertainty and excitement intertwined. Throughout this period, he began to visualize the workshop more vividly within his mind, a space for shared stories, real interrogations, and the unraveling of biases, where emergence and vulnerability became catalysts for deeper exploration. Charlie sought engagement from fellow students, collaborating with classmates who responded to his entreaties for feedback and encouragement. Their voices complemented his in the spaciousness of the workshop concept. He realized the mutual empowerment in collective discourse rather than his solitary journey. This was the cornerstone of a foundation he had been yearning for, an opportunity to elevate one another while confronting shared complexities. The moment the committee finally responded became a crescendo of anxious anticipation. When an email lit up his phone, he held his breath. The subject line read, "Approval for your workshop proposal." In one exhilarating moment, Charlie's world spun around him. Trauma, doubt, and struggle had culminated in this recognition, a foundation laid for a complex reconciliation between past and future. He had been granted the chance not only to reclaim his father's legacy but to weave it into a narrative that stood to inspire others to voice their experiences and confront their uncertainties. Filled with a mix of exhilaration and determination, Charlie felt an irreplaceable shift occur within him. He had not just become recognized in the academic realm, he had emerged as a figure committed to fostering dialogue and connection. The shadows left behind had illuminated a path forward, one not just for him but for those who would follow, who would dare to unravel their own hidden stories and embrace vulnerability. As the date of the workshop approached, Charlie reflected on the profound journey he had undertaken. Each step held significance, from the dank corners of doubt to the applause of validation. In every failure and fear, there was a transformation that knit together the fabric of his and his father's legacies into a unified voice calling out for understanding. Finally, on the day of the workshop, he embraced the room filled with eager faces, and when he spoke, it was with a newly forged conviction. Today, we will bridge the gaps between narrative and theory, vulnerability and strength. Together, we will reclaim our stories. As he stood before them, radiant with newfound confidence, he understood that transformation was not merely a personal endeavor, it was an invitation to redefine the norms of perception with a courageous heart. This workshop was a finale to a beautiful symphony of self-discovery and reclamation, a heartfelt rallying cry to seek truth in complexity, embracing the colors of human experience. Charlie had proven that one could rise above the weight of expectation, achieving not just academic success, but a profound understanding of self woven into the very fabric of his father's unforgettable legacy. Now, more than ever, he understood the depth of personal achievement, full circle in its embrace, recognizing vulnerability as a source of strength and legacy, transforming both fear and doubt into a beacon of light for others to follow. And as the applause rang out, Charlie knew he had carved his place, not just as a son reclaiming his father's dreams, but as an empowered individual ready to guide others into the conversation of discovery, a journey just beginning. You need to subscribe now, so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, it makes a difference in sharing stories of personal overcoming. Comment your thoughts and reactions. Where do you see Charlie's journey leading next? And share this video with at least 5 friends who might find hope in Charlie's transformation. Don't wait even one more second to spread these powerful narratives.